What is a website, and how does it actually work? When you open a website like Facebook or Gmail, have you ever wondered, what is happening behind the scenes? How does the page appear on your screen? Where is your information going after you log in? What makes buttons work or messages send instantly? Understanding how a web application works, from the moment you type in a web address to when you're chatting with a friend or checking your bank account, requires knowing about two major sides: the front end and the back end. They work together to create everything you see and interact with online. Let's begin by first understanding what websites were in the early days and how they evolved into the advanced web applications we use today. From static pages to dynamic web applications, a brief history. In the early 1990s, websites were nothing more than plain digital documents. Think of them like digital brochures, just text and some images, and nothing changed unless the developer edited the page manually. These were called static websites, and they were built using only HTML, hypertext markup language. There was no styling, no interactivity, just content. Soon, CSS cascading style sheets was introduced. This allowed developers to add colors, layouts, fonts, and positioning. Websites started to look more like magazines or apps. Then came JavaScript, which changed everything. Now websites could react to users, show pop-ups, validate forms, update parts of the page without reloading. This was the birth of dynamic websites. On the other side, to process user actions like logging in, saving data, or sending messages, websites needed servers that ran backend code. This is where Node.js, a JavaScript runtime for backend programming, comes in. What is the front end and what does it do? The front end is everything you see and interact with on a website. It's like the stage in a theater, what the audience sees. But behind it, there's a lot of machinery making the show happen. Let's break it down. Structure with HTML. HTML is the skeleton of the web page. It defines the layout and structure: headings, paragraphs, buttons, forms, images. Think of HTML like building blocks. Every element on a web page, like a text box or a menu, is written in HTML. Styling with CSS. CSS is what makes a page look nice. It's responsible for design and layout, colors, fonts, spacing, alignment, animations. Without CSS, every website would look like a plain Word document. CSS turns structure into style. Interactivity with JavaScript. JavaScript is what makes the page come alive. It responds to user actions: clicking a button, typing into a search box, sliding through a photo gallery, opening a drop-down menu. For example, when you press Login, JavaScript takes your username and password and prepares to send it to the backend. What is the backend and what happens after you click Login? The backend is the engine room of the web application. It's what handles logic, storage, security, and communication with databases. The backend is not visible to the user, but it's critical. When you click Login, here's what happens behind the curtain. Processing with Node.js. Node.js allows developers to write backend code using JavaScript. It's fast, efficient, and great for building web servers. The server receives the login request, checks the credentials, and sends back a response: success or failure. Connecting to a database. Your credentials are checked against a database, a big storage system where all user info is kept. If your details match, the backend sends back a confirmation. If not, it returns an error. Node.js communicates with databases like MongoDB, MySQL, PostgreSQL. Security and logic. The backend makes sure your data is secure using encryption. It also contains business logic, rules that decide how the app behaves. For example, only allow users over 18 to register. Limit file uploads to 10 megabytes. Send an email if password is changed. How do the front end and back end communicate? This connection is what makes a website into a web application. HTTP requests. When you click Login, your browser sends a request to the backend server using something called HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This request carries your login info in a secure way. It looks like post, login, body, username, user, password, one APIs, application programming interfaces. The backend provides an API, a set of rules for how it accepts requests and sends responses. It's like a contract between the front end and backend. For example, the backend might say, to get user data, send a get request to /user. To update profile, send a put request to user edit. JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. This is the language both sides use to talk to each other. It's a lightweight way to send data that both front-end and back-end understand. An example JSON response: JSON success, true, John Doe, email, john@example.com. JavaScript in the browser takes this response and updates the page. How developers build this together. Creating a web app is like building a house. You need architects, designers, builders, front-end developers, electricians, back-end developers, and planners, project managers. They often use tools and frameworks to make the process faster. Front-end tools: React, Vue, Bootstrap, Tailwind CSS. Back-end tools: Express.js, built on Node.js, Mongoose for MongoDB. Collaboration tools: GitHub, VS Code, Postman. Developers write code, test it locally, and then deploy it to the internet using platforms like Vercel or Netlify for front-end, Heroku or Render for back-end. Summary: the life of a web app interaction. 1. You visit a website. The browser loads the front-end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. 2. You fill a form. JavaScript collects your data. 3. You click Submit. The front-end sends an HTTP request to the back-end Node.js server. 4. The back-end talks to the database, checks your data, and sends a response. 5. The front-end receives the response and updates the page with new info. Why this matters and where it's going. Understanding how front-end and back-end work together is key to understanding the modern web. The web has evolved from simple pages to full-scale applications like Netflix, Zoom, and online banking. As technology advances, the line between front-end and back-end is becoming more connected with real-time communication, AI-powered features, and serverless architecture. But at its core, the web still runs on the same fundamental idea: what the user sees, front-end, and how the system responds back-end. And both must work together in perfect harmony.